Buon pomeriggio, benvenute e benvenuti.
Welcome, good afternoon. Welcome to this event presenting AEF and the technologies that AEF is working at. We will be hearing from the manufacturers about interoperability, starting from ISOBUS, and we'll talk about other initiatives as well. Interoperability of information, a very critical issue, but also a very exciting one that we will have to deal with in the coming years. We've already talked about this in the field of tractors, and this has been so since 1990. We're very much advanced in this, but when you talk about interconnectivity and communication, cloud communication, then things become a bit more critical. We're talking about this with our guests. I will introduce them as I ask the questions. First of all, of course, we would like to understand what AEF is, so a short introduction on what it is, why it developed, and why data operability is so important. We'll talk about this with Andrew Oliver, newly elected chairman of AEF. So congrats. Sorry, I will speak English. It's going to be easier for me.
Chairman of the AEF, and the AEF was formed in around 2008 to help with the interoperability of ISOBUS. ISOBUS as a standard, as a common CAN bus between tractors and implements, was first released on the market in around 2001 as a standard. Many manufacturers started working with ISOBUS because it seemed as if it's the right idea to have interoperability, so a tractor from one manufacturer, an implement from another manufacturer, all speaking the same language on the CAN bus and all able to work together. So that's the ideal picture of interoperability. Unfortunately, when ISOBUS was released, we all started developing our software and our products, and we found that things weren't actually compatible. And it was a bit of a shock to some people. So what could we do as an industry to make this better? And so in the end, it was in 2008 when the AEF was formed. And the founding members of the AEF were 7 ag equipment manufacturers and 2 trade associations. And over the last 14 years, this has actually grown to around 230 member companies. And they're all in the ag space. They're either making equipment, or they're making electronics, or they're supplying some type of service which we use on our tractors and our implements on our ag vehicles. So the AEF was formed to help with this interoperability between tractors and implements using the ISOBUS language. And the way the AEF works is we have project teams, volunteers from our member companies, and in fact, Alessio thinks I'm the chairman of the AEF, but I'm actually employed by CNH Industrial. And with my job for CNH Industrial, I get to spend some time supporting the AEF activities. So all the people that work for the AEF, apart from Marco and a couple of other people in the office, are actually volunteering time for the organization, because we all want to make this ISOBUS story better for the industry. We all believe in this interoperability. So we formed the AEF, we got together, we thought, how can we make ISOBUS easier to understand? And we started talking about ISOBUS in terms of functionalities. So these little blue squares you might have seen on some of the machines around here. And by talking about ISOBUS in terms of functionalities, the idea being, if you see the blue square on a tractor for one functionality, you see the same blue square on an implement, you know that when they're plugged together on the ISOBUS, they share that functionality. You can operate the implement with that functionality. And then we developed a conformance test, the AEF ISOBUS conformance test, which tests specifically for those functionalities. And then finally, we then released a database for which you can find ISOBUS products, in which you can find ISOBUS products. But the products in the database can only be listed there if they've passed the AEF conformance test. So if you're looking for a new ISOBUS implement for your tractor or vice versa, you look up, first of all, your tractor in the database, you can see which functionality it has, and then you look up the implement you think you want to buy. And if you can find it in the database, you can then see the combined functionalities. So these are all the things that we've been working on to help the whole industry work with ISOBUS, to have this proper interoperability between tractors and implements.
Grazie Andrew. Ecco, il ruolo della AEF nel
Thank you very much, Andrew. The role of AEF in terms of interoperability is most important. AEF is an association where manufacturers make an essential contribution thanks to their engineers and resources to be able to develop what is needed to the industry in terms of interoperability technology. And not only, we talked about database, so we also need to understand the impact of the machines, of the ISOBUS machines and interoperability. Paolo Pometto, who is a Bassan dealer and responsible for precision farming, will talk about this. There's one thing I'm always curious about, which is the impact of this technology on the farmer. You know, there was a great boom of requests because of the 4.0 smart plan, then acquisition of machines with digital technologies, etc. One of the most important technologies is ISOBUS. What was the perception on the part of the farmers? So to what extent are they aware of the ISOBUS functionality? To what extent were they requiring for ISOBUS machines specifically? What's your experience? Well, we can say that we have heard of 4.0, the 4.0 smart plan for many years. Our customers, the farmers, initially asked for connected tractors and ISOBUS equipment because of an economic factor. So they would decide to buy a connected tractor, and there were some economic benefits for them. This was the initial reason why they bought them. And then as they started using these new technologies, they realized that having a tractor connected to an ISOBUS implement and having a tractor which is without automatic guidance, with a mechanical implement was different. Certainly there was greater productivity when the tractor was connected, and there was a 20% increase in productivity. This means that farmers can work more, 4 hectares in the past every hour, and now 5. Previously they would only think of the passes, and they had to work 110 hectares, and now they actually work only 100, with an economic benefit, with higher income and saving on raw materials. As for ISOBUS equipment, yes, we sell almost only ISOBUS equipment, especially the complex equipment, for example, seed drills, etc. But for soil preparation, well, they're mostly mechanical, so there's no such need. We also found commercial partners, and we've been asked by the farmers to upgrade the equipment they have already. For example, an old seed drill. They asked whether we can transform it into an ISOBUS piece of equipment. The same is true for a fertilizer spreader. So we've found commercial partners that allow us to do this. As for AEF, they actually had a brilliant idea. They found common language for all the tractor and implement manufacturers to avoid any problems. Well, out of curiosity, you mentioned something. Well, I wasn't supposed to ask this, but still, I'm curious about this. When they ask for retrofitting the implements, what are their expectations? Because, you know, the electronic side is very much linked to the management of the implements and their functions and functionalities. When they ask for a retrofit, what do they expect? What type of functionality or information? Well, basically, the farmers don't expect to have a new implement because it's two entirely different products, but they intend to save money on sowing, for example, or applying the products. For sowing, you can save up to 10-12% seeds in the application of seeds. So they intend to save money on this. Well, clearly we're talking about tractors, we're talking about implements. We mentioned the ISOBUS functionalities. We'll talk more about these later. You know, AEF tools ensure compatibility between these or among these functionalities. Oliver already mentioned the importance of the database. I'd like to ask Marco Bruck, AEF project manager, which direction this database is moving to. You know, there was an initial escalation in the adoption on the part of manufacturers, but now it's adopted by manufacturers and dealers to a larger extent, and AEF is trying to extend the functions. How was this database developed, and what about the improvements and new functions that are being implemented, also maybe for the future?
Introduction, Alessian, for the question. I would first like to introduce myself shortly. Andrew mentioned most of our project members are kind of volunteering for our projects and for part of our organization, but for me it's my daily job. I'm an employee of the AEF. As you mentioned, I'm the project manager for conformance test development, but I'm also supporting the development of our AEF database. But probably before we come to these tools, I would like to say some words about our AEF Plugfest. This is one of the events that we organized because, yeah, as Andrew mentioned, in the beginning ISOBUS was introduced and the expectation was, okay, we introduce a standard and all interoperability issues are solved with this standard. But yeah, as you all know, also for software development, no first version is perfectly. So the AEF thought, okay, what can we do to really make sure that companies and software developers are implementing according to the standard and that the combinations, the final products will really work in the combination. And we started to host events called Plugfest, where software developers come with their devices, with their electronic units and with their terminals to do some kind of round robin over multiple days where they test, we call it a bit developer speed dating, where they test with other companies, other software developers, where they plug their devices together and test whether the device combinations really work. But yeah, in the early stages, we recognized that it's not enough to just offer this event to our members. We also have to introduce a independent tool to test and to certify devices for compatibility and therefore for interoperability. So our project teams responsible for testing started to specify conformance tests for our functionalities. Andrew already mentioned these blue icons that we have on our database, but how can you get this blue icon and how can you come to the AEF certification? Well, we have 5 independent test laboratories which are responsible to actually test the ISOBUS devices and products. So you will send your terminal or your equipment to the testing house and they will do 1, 2, 3 days of testing, and if you pass all the conformance tests you will in the end get the AEF certified label, and afterwards you will be able to upload your product to the AEF database and present it to the public, to the customers, to the farmers, as well as to other manufacturers to say, hey, I'm compliant to the standard, and if you decide for my product, the combination will work. Alessio, you mentioned the extensions, and I already said no software is perfect in early stages. So we are always relying on feedback from our members and also from dealers. So we also host regular service councils where we ask service people from our members to come together virtually or face-to-face and talk about the latest season. So we are meeting in fall, for example, talk about the latest seasons and what are the ISOBUS issues that you experience in the market, especially with already certified products. And we receive feedback like, okay, we definitely have issues with prescription maps in the field. If some devices are certified, but we nevertheless have issues with the resulting task data, we cannot import them into our farm management systems, issues like that. And out of these service councils, we, as a result, we extend our database. Just to give one example, and I'm trying to not to get too technical, we have a task data validator on our website which automatically tests task data if it's compliant to the standard, and dealers, customers, farmers can upload their task data and get feedback about the quality of this data set. And it's the same about the conformance test. No test, no software can be perfect and can cover the complete standard, so we rely on feedback from the field, and we are, it's an ongoing improvement of our tools and services.
Grazie. La Plug Fest è sicuramente uno degli eventi più particolari.
Thank you. Thank you. The Plug Fest is really a special event. It was held in Bologna, by the way, a month ago, more or less. It was very successful. 330 participants, if I'm not wrong. 60 test stations altogether, including the conformance test stations. It's a great success. It is indeed a tool which allows companies with ISOBUS products to test them. Let's hear from those implementing the ISOBUS software in their products and services. What's your approach to this technology? Gian Maria Selvatici will be the first to speak, R&D Department of Nobili. You started not long ago, if I'm not wrong, to introduce the ISOBUS technology in your machinery, especially for specialized crops. It's the sector which where this technology is not that widespread. Why did you make this choice? What are your expectations? Tell us about this.
Thank you, Alessio. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Gian Maria Di Nobili. Let me briefly introduce Nobili and our R&D department. We manufacture implements for vineyards and open field, so smaller and larger machines. The second business area is the sprayers, air blasters, and so specialized implements, so we can increasingly introduce these technologies. Why is ISOBUS so important? I'm starting from one consideration. Today and in the future, it's increasingly important for the implement to dialogue with the tractor. This is a very important precondition for me. because we increasingly feel the need to have machines with top-notch performance, like we shouldn't waste our product, we should have machines that enable me not to waste my time. So if I have a dialogue between the tractor and the implement, I can have a perfect combination of two machines, and I can use the antenna on the tractor to understand where I've already passed and where I yet have to go. But the antenna is on the tractor. I don't need it on the implement, which is something that in non-ISOBUS system, we have independent systems, and so the machine has to have a GPS and additional information that I need to make our operations more efficient. And as we all know, with increased costs, if I make the implement too complicated and expensive, I'm out of the market. What we can do with ISOBUS is totally different. For many years, we have examined ISOBUS, but we cannot have large volumes of sales, especially for small implements. So we cannot afford joining AEF, and we cannot afford certification costs. Certification is certainly a very important tool, in my opinion. Agriculture is currently faced with an explosion of technology on the machines. But if you work on the field, sometimes you're not able to manage all this. You cannot do troubleshooting whenever necessary. So farmers, whenever needing that, they can be sure that they can have a good dialogue between the implement and the tractor. This is our experience. We're increasingly introducing that, especially into air sprayers. In mulchers, we have some electronic applications that for the time being are not following ISOBUS, but in the future, if we can increase our sales, then we do hope to be able to join the ISOBUS home. It's an interesting insight, really. We're always very inclined to think that developing technology and ISOBUS represents an additional cost for the manufacturer, a major economic outlay, which makes the machine more expensive and has an impact on the market. But this is actually not what you're saying. You're saying that for farmers and end users, buying the machine is advantageous because many systems are already available on the machine, and in the end the implement gets less expensive. Of course, we can get to connectivity and the cloud, and we should open up a completely different topic. But let's close the circle about the machines on the field. Argo Tractor, you've long been developing ISOBUS systems on your tractors. So I'm asking Claudio Corsini, in charge of development, electronics and software at the Argo Group, why have you made this choice? What are your challenges? The same question I asked to Gian Maria, but on the tractor side, why did you choose ISOBUS? Well, good afternoon, everyone. The advantages for the farmer are many. For instance, while using new technologies and new systems makes it possible to have considerable economic trade-off, so less expenses, less labor hours, and an overall advantage, and better performed operations, because if you have electronic systems supporting you on the field, you can do a better job. Tractors can communicate with the implement and exchange data, can cooperate. But if I have a traditional implement and a traditional tractor, I have two separate systems that work independently. Each one of them doesn't know what the other's doing. They cannot possibly work together. And so we have worse efficiency. And in this case, we can save money on sensors, for instance. Sensors are already fitted onto the tractor and must not be replicated on the implement. And even more expensive systems don't have to be fitted on the tractor, such as a GPS system. Another important point, with ISOBUS you can have just one monitor in the cab, and so you don't need to have a monitor on each implement, and this means that the implement is less costly and also that you need a shorter setup time for the implement. I start a new operation, or connect the implement and everything's working, so I don't have to put cables, plug in cables, and think of a power supply. So the monitor already knows the ergonomics of the cab and is placed sometimes in an uncomfortable position when you need to fit it. So everything gets more complicated. And consequently, safety is at risk, because knowing something that you know and it's always the same thing is easier, and you're more likely to make mistakes. And that applies to cab controls. With the aux functions, I can use joysticks or buttons already fitted on the tractor, placed ergonomically to control the implement. And this, of course, makes operators' work much easier. We know how complex it is to find skilled operators in agriculture. So it's an additional advantage. And that applies to specialized tractors. The small size one in a larger tractor have a lot of space, so you may have more components in the cab, no problem. But on a specialized tractor, that may be a problem. I don't have enough space sometimes. Not even the operator can fit in because it's just 1 meter wide. So adding more objects would become very complicated. I'd like to go back to certification, which is so important. We make tractors, but we don't make implements. So we use implements made by different manufacturers. If I have a certification, I am sure that the language spoken by tractor and implement is the same, and so I have less problems in terms of servicing, troubleshooting. So sometimes you connect the implement and it doesn't work. Thank you very much, Claudio. Are you implementing ISOBUS on specialized implements? Because as we were discussing before, they are the ones with lower sales that sell less on the market, and in spite of the added value coming from the ISOBUS technology, volumes do matter. From the AEF viewpoint, I think the association has about 250 member companies, so a considerable number of companies all over the world, from all over the world, that collaborate with one another, that work in partnership. So how do you feel about specialized agriculture and related issues? You know, the machines for specialized operations that sell small volumes.
Tractors?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So,
and implements.
yeah, I like to speak about tractors. No, so there's always the question, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And in the case of ISOBUS, it's always kind of, we've always been following along those lines as well. If you're making implements, do you bother with ISOBUS if there are no tractors in that sector which support ISOBUS? Or if you have a tractor, do you bother implementing ISOBUS on the tractor if there's no implements which need that functionality? And I think as we're looking at the specialty range, again, it's the same story. Is it the chicken or the egg that kind of leads the way? But what I think is really encouraging is the focus that's going on in our societies. It doesn't matter which country you live in now, but the focus towards sustainability, the focus that, we understand that precision farming is a it's a necessity these days. No matter what you're doing, no matter what size of tractor and implements that you have, that you're using. And so one of the easiest ways to get on the precision farming road is to add electronics, because electronics can automate the control of what you're doing. Electronics can record the actions that you've done. So if you need to report to the local council, the local state, the local region, the government, the electronics can help you do that reporting almost automatically, because they're recording what you've done. From the point of view of, if you're a company that makes tractors and you make tractors throughout the whole range, then it's a lot easier to start adding electronics, ISOBUS, to the smaller tractors, because you've already got them on the larger range and you've got that, if you like, that benefit of the volume. So it becomes less expensive to do that. And so we talked about precision farming, we talked about sustainability, we talked about the value that electronics can give you. And so the easiest way to realize that is with ISOBUS. So I sort of feel that it's really going to be the tractor manufacturers that would be leading the way towards the specialty sector, the orchard and the vineyard sector, because we've already got this technology in-house. We just need to start releasing it on more and more ranges. And then once we have the technology there, then I think it's going to be easier, apologies, on the implement side to respond to that and to be adding electronics on the implement side. And when you add electronics, the easiest thing to do is to add ISOBUS. We did speak about functionalities before, and one of the most recent functionalities that we released was at the end of 2019, and it was the functionality which is called TIM, or Tractor Implement Management. The whole idea about TIM is that it allows the implement to control certain functions on the tractor automatically. The operator still has to be in the cab, but the operator can do less. He doesn't need to always be watching what's going on with the implement. And so the beauty of TIM, for me, it's the next level after auto guidance. So when auto guidance was introduced, there was the fact that you didn't have to drive in straight rows anymore, because the tractor would manage that on its own. The operator could then go, okay, I'm not concentrating on the straight rows, I need to concentrate on what the implement's doing. Now with the TIM functionality, the operator doesn't even have to concentrate on what the implement's doing, because it's managing itself. It's got its own brain, it's thinking, it's requesting what it needs from the tractor. Whether it's saying to the tractor, go faster or go slower, steer left or steer right, give me some more hydraulic flow, switch the PTO on and off, for example. That's the beauty of the TIM functionality. So I suspect what we'll find is, again, in the specialty, the smaller tractor sector, the vineyard and orchard sector, we might leap, if you like, standard ISOBUS and go towards TIM. The reason being that we go from purely manual implements to implements which have electronic control, but also the ability to think themselves. You know, there's all this automation going on. Even if you look around the show here, there's a lot of people that have released robots, autonomous vehicles. And for the implements to make a leapfrog to using the TIM functionality is really a way of kind of trying to join up with the autonomous sector. And my hope is that that is sort of where we're going.
Quindi possiamo dire che l'auspicio.
So we can say is that the hope is that the tractor and the implement become one and only thing. We talked about functionality, introduced the TIM functionality. Let's talk about it more in detail and in broader terms, because a question that we ask quite frequently, especially when getting into more technical discussions, So the question is, to what extent have these functionalities become widespread on the market? When the manufacturers have to provide information on functionalities to their customers. And so are the farmers aware of the different functionalities and their features, what they can do with them? So that's a question I'd like to ask Paolo Pometto. So what's your experience? And then going back to the previous comments, have you received any requests for specific functionalities in specialized machines? Well, as specialized crops, we as dealers have a medium to high range of power, so it's not our bread and butter, so specialized crops. But we're going into that direction. When a farmer comes to us to buy an implement, basically they're looking for simplicity. So the implement has to be user-friendly, must be effective, and sometimes low cost. They've always asked for low-cost implements, and they're still asking for them, and probably in the future too. But over and above that, they want the implement to be certified. It's become mandatory practically, and certification is requested by the farmer, and also something that we have to take into account as dealers in order to provide the right product to our customers and not ending up with the problems later on when having to provide after-sales service and troubleshooting. There's an increasing focus on the interconnectivity between the machine and the implement for two reasons. Number one, from an agronomic viewpoint, let me explain. If I have a database with all operation data, sowing, chemical applications, harvesting, and then establishing an interface with data on soil analysis, satellite data, whatever new technologies I've implemented, allows me to produce maps that I can use in distributing fertilizers and seeds, so I can use chemicals whenever necessary and in the right amounts and have a good economic return. Number two, the second aspect related to the data coming from the implement connected to the machine is of an economic nature. And products that you find in supermarkets are all, made in Italy, carbon-free, and so local products. So that's what they claimed. So we can provide geolocalized data that have an economic impact for farmers. So farmers may get a little bit more money from their products when they sell. So having certified products, being aware of their compatibility and compliance means I can get field data which are compliant and that can be used for the following applications in order to correctly manage my crops. And this gives me an idea for the next question. Marco, a question for you. Or some information on a certification that has recently been released for the software managing this data for certification and for the systems to be interfaced with this software. Talking about data, connectivity and interoperability, AEF's work is expanding. There are so many new areas of activity. Can you please give us an overview of the activities carried out by AEF and the new areas of interest?
Sure. Yeah, the example you mentioned about certification, is we are trying to not only certify implement and tractors, but only a third component which is really important for the field, which are farm management information systems. So yeah, we often get feedback from dealers and from the field that the task data is not compliant to the standard, or at least not importable to terminals or to farm management information systems. And therefore, we decided to include farm management information systems to our database as well as to the conformance test. So yeah, we extended our test tool with this functionality, and we are testing yeah, the import and export basically of task data XML into terminal, export it from the terminal and import it again into the farm management system, and check if this, yeah, let's say, circle between machines and software works. So this is the extension you mentioned. But yeah, you're right. The electronics world, and especially information technology, is not standing still, as we can see here at this amazing show. All halls are crowded and all people are interested in new technology. And especially in the hall 37, you can see autonomous rovers and many new machines and technologies. So our members as well are making their experiences with prototypes in the direction of wireless communication, as well as on yeah, other communication models, because yeah, the communication electronics are not limited to CAN or ISOBUS. We also have a project team focusing on a high-speed variant of ISOBUS, which is based on a yeah, on the Ethernet protocol, and which will be used for use cases like yeah, delivering video streams from client to the tractor or from the implement to the tractor and show it in the cabin. We are focusing on other projects like wireless in-field communication, which is a yeah, pretty new project team in our organization, and I think the name is pretty self-explaining. They are focusing on wireless communication in the field. One example use case is a common prescription map, which is shared between two tractors working on one large field. So the farmer don't or is not limited to having to yeah, work on the field with one tractor. He can use two combinations of tractor and implements, and both are communicating wirelessly with each other.
Ecco, tantissime attività che sono in corso, che probabilmente partiranno.
So many ongoing activities, some about to be rolled out, about security, for instance, another important data security and personal data handling. So many activities and working groups which have been completed somehow. One was about the high power interface, which can give me an idea for an additional question to Gianmaria Selvatici. This has been, well, you were the first ones in Italy to develop cooperation with somebody else, to develop this kind of connection, transmission of electric power between the tractor and the implement. It was an air spray, if I'm not wrong. It was awarded the Technical Innovation Prize last year. It was totally electric. So how comes you made this decision? What are the upsides and downsides of the project, also in terms of costs?
Adesso diciamo presentando quello che è in realtà il reparto ricerca e sviluppo, quindi il reparto in cui lavoro, dicendo che ISOBUS...
Well, ISOBUS to us is something which is part of the vocabulary used at our company. It's something we use on a daily basis. But then we have gone beyond in the electrification project, which was developed 4 or 5 years ago. Then we also talked to CNH and started a cooperation with them for field testing. They we developed the e-sprayer and the e-mulcher, presented at AIMA Digital Preview during the pandemic, and then they were on display last year at the fair. They were actually presented several times on the field, and they won many awards. At Nobili, for many years, we wanted to try new powertrains, so from the usual shaft to these solutions. There are many benefits in terms of saving up to 40% on fuel, then increased performance. All the machines are set manually today. But I think it's increasingly important that the tractor and the implement communicate, because I think one day the tractor and the implement will talk to each other so much that they can almost work autonomously. For orchards and vineyards, for example, we will have maps reading the vegetation. We will have a tractor which dialogues with the implement and starts configuring, setting up the implement in the right way, changing the fan revolutions automatically, changing the distribution system automatically, and so on and so forth. That's why this crosstalk is very important. There were many difficulties, for example, costs above all. We are ready, I think, for a pre-series. At regulatory level, there are still some difficulties. The regulatory way is not clear yet, but for sure the high voltage is the standard, and it has laid down the right foundations. Here in Quadriportico, there are so many innovations on display, again based on electrification. My take-home message is these applications are really promising for tomorrow's and the future of agriculture. So let's try and establish a dialogue between implement manufacturers, equipment manufacturers, etc. Let's try to find a common way to go for the sake of technology. You know, the plug, which is, specified according to the standards, has an impact in terms of costs, a very high impact in terms of costs. We were the first in Italy to electrify a chopper and an air blaster. You know, we still have to hope that the economy of scale will favor the penetration of these technologies. Electrification, automation, two very important words. AMA digital was mentioned before, and robotics. I think almost all robotic solutions are electrically operated and autonomous. So these are two keywords that are common to tractors as well. Claudio, you are implementing hybrid drives and fully electric drives for your machines, but in your future there is always also TIN for orchard and vineyard machines. For sure, yes, tractors alone or implements alone cannot do their job entirely, so they have to work as a single entity, and necessarily we need to automate the operations. If this becomes a reality in open field tractors, this is even more complex with specialized machines. Not because of technology, because technology is the same in the two categories, but the problem, from my point of view as a manufacturer, is that normally the customers are different. So what happens is those with big fields have large surface areas. Instead, those working in orchards and vineyards are smaller farmers, less industrialized, where it's more difficult to make them understand that it's important to increase technology to improve productivity, etc. But from my point of view, this is the road we must go through. It is mandatory. It will be our future. So in your future too, there is electrification, automation. You also mentioned another challenge. There is a difference between large fields and specialized crops. Well, time is short, unfortunately, so let me ask you a very quick question requiring a very quick answer from you. How important is education and training? Here in EMA we see lots of students, groups of students walking around. We want them to be curious, we want them to be eager to approach new technologies. How important is training? Also training of customers by dealers, or training of engineers that have to develop the machines. Training in general, and how important is it to make the machines simpler? Let's start from Andrew.
There's always the need to make the machines simpler. No matter how hard we try from the manufacturer point of view to come up with a nice user interface, to make it easy to configure, to make it easy to operate. You know, we've all become used to smartphones and how simple it is to install apps on the smartphone and to do things with your phone. And ideally, in the equipment space, we need to be moving in that direction. We need to make things so simple that in the end, the operator doesn't have to do anything. You know, he gets in the cab, he's got something on his wrist, so the system recognizes which operator he is. He is, she is, they are. And in the end, they drive to a field, and thanks to the GPS, the system knows which field they're in and what needs to be done. So we need to be going in that direction, so we need to make it so much simpler. But obviously, that doesn't happen overnight, and we need this. We need to do more in the education space to make sure that we're trying to teach people as much as possible about the technology that we can use on our machines now and in the future. Within my own company, you know, as I'm sure it's the same with many people here, we're struggling to find the right engineers that have the right knowledge in electronics and software for our companies to keep doing more. So education is so important, we've got to be supporting it.
Quindi dobbiamo lavorare, portare qua anche gli studenti di ingegneria.
We have to bring here also the IT engineers and the electronic engineers. Tomorrow there will be some of them. You can instruct them and tell them about mechanization so that they become interested in farming rather than the automotive industry. Same question on training and education for operators and farmers. How important is this? Well, let me answer very quickly. For 1.5 years, we have implemented a team which is Precision Ag Technology, 7 of us, in the areas of Veneto and Friuli, here in Italy. We also train our customers. So basically, we're not only precision farming experts, we also hold specialized courses for our customers in classrooms and also on the field. We believe very much in this. We are pushing our customers to generate correct data and be ready for the future. AEF deals with this from the manufacturer's point of view, but I think you can tell us about the association's point of view on training and education. How important is training to you?
Yeah, well, as a AEF employee, I don't have too much contact to the end customers or farmers, but yeah, the approach we are taking as a marketing team as well as the service and diagnostic team from AEF is to prepare training material and web-based trainings for dealers, service technicians, so that our members and more or less as many employees of these members as possible are aware of what is AEF doing, what are our functionalities about, what are our tools about, for what do you use the AEF database, for what do you use the conformance test tool. So we are in contact with the responsibles within our member companies, and we are trying to help with training documents there as much as we can.
Grazie. Gianmaria Selvatici, il vostro punto di vista su questo tema e quanto fate fatica voi?
Selvatici, your point of view about this, how difficult it is for you to recruit the right engineers and technicians. Well, Alessio, very simply, in my opinion, and I'm going back to what you were saying before, you were mentioning automotive, the automotive industry, but not only, also the packaging industry. I think that farming should not be envious of these sectors. In agriculture, we have many more technologies and needs and much larger problems, because in the automotive world, you know, the car is a car and that's it. But in agriculture, you have the tractor, you have the implements, they're all independent, and the challenge is for them to talk. Certainly we have to identify roles that are competent, people that are competent in their roles, but certainly this increase in technology in farming is making the sector more attractive as a whole. I think there will be major changes, you know, the robotics, this future vision will change the state of the art, and it's not so far. We're not talking about a so distant future. This is changing the concept of farming, and many more people are approaching the sector. Yes, also in our sector, technology attracts young people. That's very good. It's a positive factor. Do you agree, Claudio? Yes. From the point of view of training, we need to train the whole network, not only the final user, but the whole sales and service network. You know, the reasons why you sell a product have to be well known to the salespeople. They must be aware of the additional benefits to explain why a certain product may cost more. And also the service people, if they don't trust technology, they tend not to sell the machine because they are afraid not to be able to repair and fix any problems if they arise. Thank you for this last comment. Time is really very, very short. There's not time for questions from the floor. We really have to close. I'd like to thank all of you, all the speakers in Hall 37 in AMA Digital. You can find the booth of AEF. Andrew, Marco will stay today and tomorrow, Marco Bruckers at least. They will answer your doubts and questions. Booth C39. Enjoy your AMA. Thank you very much for joining us.